And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
Monday, October 9th, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. Exciting show tonight. We have a review of two exciting films, that being The Exorcist Believer, the new film in the Exorcist franchise, as well as Rebecca Miller's new film, She Came to Me. It's October, so we're going to start getting more horror movies in theaters. And joining me to review The Exorcist the Believer, you've seen him more times than any guest. Is one of my favorite people to talk movies with. The one, the only, Kirk Kolakowski. Kirk, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Payson. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. Yeah. Last week we had some technical difficulties, so I will be making up the reviews next that I was supposed to be doing last week for next week, because next week no movies except for the Eras Tour by Taylor Swift are releasing. So I said, you know what? That'll be a perfect time to make up the review. But yeah, I say we jump right into our first review of the night, that being The Exorcist the Believer. This is the new legacy sequel to the original Exorcist. It actually doesn't acknowledge any other Exorcist film aside from the original one from 1973, directed by William Friedkin. This film directed by David Gordon Green. This one is set in present day, and we follow a man by the name of William, who has lost his wife around 13 years ago. And wouldn't you know it, his child is starting to maybe see demons. As we might see, certain characters from the other Exorcist movies are called in. And wouldn't you know it, some possessions start going on. Kirk, what has been your history with both, especially the original Exorcist film, and then the franchise as a whole?
I only watched the first Exorcist a few years ago. Okay. Honestly, like, the reputation kind of scared me away as being like the scariest movie ever. And when I finally watched it, I realized that I'd kind of been sold a false bill of goods on that movie, because every clip I'd ever seen of it in my entire life was from the last half hour of the movie. And I had no idea there was so much character work and character building and story building, world building in that film. So I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. I actually haven't seen any of the sequels. I meant to watch a couple of them for this show just so I had some frame of reference, but I didn't get a chance to. But I heard Exorcist 3 is okay, but the rest are very skippable.
Yeah, I'm honestly very similar to your history with The Exorcist. Is similar to mine. I watched the first Exorcist, I want to say, like, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And yeah, like you said, the only thing I really knew about it was stuff that happened in the last 20 minutes of the film. And something I was shocked is how much of just the original Exorcist just feels like such an essential 70s film, with how it looks and how the characters talk, and how there's a lot of talk about, like, religion, and how there's a lot of talk like, is this really happening? Is it not? I love how the movie doesn't really, like, spoon feed you in, like, what's going on. And yeah, like you said, I've really never seen any of the sequels. I know the third film was directed by the person who wrote the original novel, and I've heard that's the only one that really kind of got what The Exorcist was. William Friedkin has often said Exorcist II: The Heretic was kind of a tragedy in his eyes. Didn't have any kind words to say. And I believe in the 2000s there was Exorcist: The Beginning and Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. Yeah. Both those films directed by Rennie Harlin and Paul Schrader. So, like, they've always had, like, fairly big names attached to it. Honestly, with Paul Schrader directing that one, I kind of want to check out that one just because I do kind of love Paul Schrader. Yeah. But yeah, going into this film, I was not the biggest fan of David Gordon Green's original Halloween film. I liked it, but I wasn't, like, as high on it as some other people were. I didn't like Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. So going into this movie, I was just like, okay, let's see how he's going to be able to handle the Exorcist film. Of course, there was a big battle for the distribution rights of this film. And unfortunately, I think my main issue with this movie is I think David Gordon Green fundamentally misunderstands what made the original Exorcist so effective. And I'm just going to jump right into my main issue with this movie. Is something I love about the original film is nothing is really like explicitly explained. The movie really takes its time to let you see what's going on. Reagan is not possessed until like 45 minutes into that original film. And it really just lets you think, like, is she really possessed, until around like the last 20 minutes where they're like, okay, we need to get an exorcism. It really does seem like the devil's happening. This one, it very much explains like immediately, like, hey, devils are real. This is going on. And it kind of treats the audience kind of like children, with how it just needs to explain every little detail. Did that bother you, Kirk, in terms of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, there was a lot. I mean, my whole deal with this movie, I think if you take the name Exorcist out of it and you remove some cameos, things, like, it's just a generic Exorcist movie, and like that's kind of the part and parcel of what you get with those movies. Like, that's what it felt like. It felt like just any other Exorcist movie, jump scares, all that. So yeah, I feel like it was missing that heart. And I mean, I will say, to its credit, it did have more character work than I expected from it. Like, you really got connected with the father and the daughter. But yeah, as far as the lore itself, yeah, they were very much into explaining the rules. There are a lot of rules for this movie.
Yeah, I think that's just a big like cliche with like modern movie making that I think just kind of bothers me. Is you watch movies from the past, they don't need to explain every little detail because they expect the audience to keep up and they'll be able to put certain things together. This movie just doesn't have that respect for the audience, where it needs to explain every little thing that is going on. Where I'm watching this and I'm like, you can have a little bit more faith in the people that are watching your movie, and you can have more faith in that they are intelligent enough that they can put certain things together. And something I love about the first Exorcist, it honestly kind of feels like a mystery going through the movie, while this one just doesn't have that, like, at all. One of the big positives I do think about this movie, one of the only major positives, I do think the acting is pretty good. Leslie Odom Jr. plays the father in this movie, who is still grieving from his wife. He's become super overly protective of his daughter, and he plays this part extremely well. I think probably my favorite moments of the movie are in the second act, where stuff does start happening to his daughter, and he plays the distraught father really, really well. I think both of the child performers, that being Olivia Markham and Lydia Jewett, also are very good child actors. Obviously, when it comes to getting child performers, you never know what's going to happen. I think they do a very, very good job. Were there any like other major highlights of the cast for you, Kirk? And what did you think about those three cast members?
Yeah, I think Leslie Odom Jr. did a great job. I think he was really like just playing that role, like you said, with he was a grieving father, and they didn't lean in that too hard. That was what the whole movie was about. But you got that, and they did a good job establishing the relationship with the daughter and where they were at in their lives, and where the story kind of takes them. But yeah, I think both child actors were really good. I think with the possession scenes, I think they handled that really well. I think the parents of the other daughter, the friend, I think they did a really good job, because they had kind of a different response to the possession, and the way they played off the other parent, I think, was interesting as well.
No, 100%. I do think they were very good. Some other people that I think didn't quite. I wouldn't say like they were bad per se, but it just, as when they were in the movie, I was just like, why did you get those actors to play that part? Okay, only one major person I had that. Ann Dowd plays a nurse in this movie who we learn was an ex-nun. And Ann Dowd is usually an actress that I love. I think she should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Mass a few years ago. I think she was absolutely excellent in that movie. I think she's excellent in The Handmaid's Tale. She's excellent in Hereditary. Like, anytime she pops up, I'm usually really into what she's doing. I don't think she really just had a ton to do in this movie. Like, the script just didn't really give her that much to do. We learn a little bit about her character, that she was a nun, and something tragic happened in her past that made her essentially leave the nundom, or the monastery, and she's kind of had a little bit of shame ever since. but the movie just doesn't give a ton to do. And yeah, if you've seen the trailers, you know that Ellen Burstyn, who played Chris McNeil from the original Exorcist, she does show up, and this is not Jamie Lee Curtis in the new Halloween movies. She is essentially just there to kind of get a paycheck. She's there to read the lines. She's there to explain certain things. Her whole character dynamic honestly doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm sorry, it makes no sense that after the events of the original Exorcist, Chris McNeil would go on to write a book about the exorcism when in the original movie, she is so secretive about what's going on with her daughter. She doesn't want anyone to know. And I just thought that was kind of insulting to the legacy of that character. Did any of what I just mentioned, Kirk, bother you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Chris McNeil was, I mean, I think the performance, like you said, was just really phoned in. And she was obviously just there to be like, hey, look who it is. And really, other than a bunch of exposition, didn't serve any point to the story at all. She's, I won't give too much away, but she's not in it a lot. She shows up to kind of, like I said, to bridge the two movies, but even that is done very poorly. And it kind of, I don't know, it just felt to me like it was undoing and unraveling a lot of what the original movie did and what what the original exorcism was and who those priests were. I think there's a lot of like undoing, unraveling, and disrespect to that. So no, I did not like that. Like I said, I think if this you take her out of this movie, you take Tubular Bells out of this movie, and everybody be like, oh yeah, it's a pretty fun exorcism movie. But I think just her being there is just a really wet blanket on the whole thing.
It's so funny watching this movie, and I'm talking to the right person here. It made me understand The Last Jedi detractors a little bit more, because I'm watching this movie and I'm like, maybe if it wasn't called The Exorcist, I wouldn't be as mad. But I think everything this movie does with how it just gets everything about the original Exorcist wrong, I think this is where a lot of my complaints come from. And I honestly do think those are valid complaints in a way, because the movie is called The Exorcist, the Believer. It should have a little bit more respect. And I just think when you think about that original movie, how personal of a story it is between Chris McNeil and Reagan McNeil, and then eventually Father Karras, who is also dealing with his own religious trauma with his mother, and just making this movie about, and we'll get into this later, maybe one of the things I hate the most, how this movie comes down to like the real superpower of teamwork in the end, I just think was really, really silly. One of the things I did like, I do think the first act of this movie does a pretty good job at setting the tension and setting the scares really well. Maybe better than like David Gordon Green has ever done. Like when you have the kids in the woods just going around and just like finding old things, like it's a little strange that this is in modern times, because obviously with the original Exorcist being in the 70s, like kids would just wander around all the time. Sure. You don't get too much of that nowadays, but like I'll take that a little bit of it's a movie. Like I'm willing to look past that a little, but I did think the first act did a decent job at setting things up. What did you think about the setup of this movie?
Yeah, I like the fact, we mentioned that it does really belabor the point once like the exorcism stuff starts, but I like the fact that they don't explain what the demon is. Like the girls wander off, they're found, and something weird happened. And we get real quick little flashes throughout the movie, but it's never really explained. Like they don't try to like connect it to Pazuzu and like, oh, it's this and he's come back, or it's this other demon and here's a big story. The whole background to that, like it just happened. They were in some place they shouldn't have been, and something happened. And I really like that part of it, that it's just a demon possession and we don't know why. So yeah, I really like to set up the mystery of what happened to them, seeing it from the parents' point of view and the community's point of view, because obviously it's an Exorcist movie, we know they're going to be possessed, but like them trying to figure out from a practical standpoint what happened to their kids is really interesting.
No, yeah, I think it's so funny. I can tell you the exact scene where this movie kind of lost me, and it involves the characters inside of a church, where it really just feels like David Gordon Green was trying to take a scene from the original Exorcist and say, watch me do it better. And that was when the movie just kind of lost me, just because I'm sorry, like there's nothing that'll take me out of a movie more than CGI blood. I think CGI blood is a travesty in terms of movie making, and I think we just need to get away from it because it's not scary. It's not scary at all. I think certain filmmakers like David Fincher are able to use it well when they're not trying to make it scary, just when they're trying to just use it in general. Like, I think of Gone Girl, where Neil Patrick Harris gets his throat slit, and knowing that that's CGI, I'm like, I would not have known that CG. Like, sure. I think that looks real. Like, when it's not being used to be scary, I think it's effective. But when you're trying to scare someone, I'm like, just, you got to get practical with me.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I think what makes that first movie so effective is when Pazuzu is puking on Father Marin and Father Karras. It's real, and you feel how gross it is. I'm just gonna get into like probably the moment where the movie just, it had already kind of lost me, but then the moment where I was like, I'm out. The last act of this movie, where when the exorcism is about to be performed, and the movie kind of becomes like a Seven Samurai-esque film of just getting different exorcisms, of just getting different priests and giving different like religious experts to all come together and like take out, like exorcise these demons in like a sense of teamwork. I'm just like, what are we doing? I just thought that was incredibly stupid and incredibly shoehorned. Kirk, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I said in my Letterboxd review, non-denominational Avengers Assemble.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it was. And I mean, I guess for a modern audience, people are more sensitive to that or whatever. But it seemed like there was just like a real effort. Like, we can't offend anybody, and we can't, like, we have to give everybody credit. Like, all really, like, there's a point where they're doing the exorcism, and she's like, I pray on behalf of all holy beings. Like, just let it be. I mean, just let it be Catholic rituals. You know,
yes.
I mean, it's not real. You know, it's make believe. You don't have to have every single like religion and belief system represented, and to like try to fill them all in and kind of give them their own moment. I mean, watching them go through the hoops was interesting, but it was completely unnecessary.
The movie is called The Exorcist. I think most audiences are willing to accept that this movie is going to have a lot of Catholicism and a lot of Catholic imagery in it. I think we are okay with that. At least I really, really hope. The internet oftentimes will go the extra mile to like amaze me and like what it won't accept. But I really hope that we can still accept that, like you said. But yeah, I just think that was just a really just shoehorned way to do the third act. There's a twist revealed towards the third act about what happened with Victor's daughter and why what happened with Victor's wife and why the demon might be possessing Victor's daughter. And it's not a bad twist, but I think I just kind of saw it coming with everything that's kind of set up in the first act. By the way, the first act is completely like, I wouldn't say a ripoff of the original Exorcist film, but it's very much trying to pay nods with like how the original Exorcist opens in Iraq. This one opens in Haiti.
Yeah.
It opens with two dogs fighting, very reminiscent to the like the scene in The Exorcist where you see the two dogs fighting. There are a lot of little Easter eggs in this movie. To me, those things never really are that effective to me. Like, does the whole member berries thing that are in certain legacy sequels work for you, Kirk? I feel like they wouldn't.
I mean, most of the time, no. Like, sometimes they can work them in organically and make them part of the story and make them interesting. But it was just, when it's just like, hey, look at this, remember this? Yeah, that's never fun.
Yeah. So, this is just a movie. Like, the more I think about, like, if it was any other franchise, I would just say this is kind of a generic horror movie. But with it having that Exorcist name and carrying that legacy in a way, it just makes me like more frustrated and angry as to like what this movie could be and how it's just completely missing the point of what it should be. Before we head into final ratings, is there anything else you want to say, Kirk?
No, like I said, I feel like well, first of all, I probably wouldn't have saw it if it wasn't called Exorcist, but so that's probably why they did it. I understand. But if it was just like the exorcism of this guy's daughter and, we went and saw it, I'd be like, oh, that was fine. It was, it was one of those movies. It was a good way to kill an hour and 45 minutes. But when you tack on that legacy for no other reason than just to tack it on, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for people to hate it.
Yeah, and without spoiling anything, the last shot of this movie is the title card of the film to essentially say, like, hey, I hope you like this movie because David Gordon Green's going to be making a second one, which David Gordon Green, please, like, find some way out of this contract. Like, he used to be such an interesting indie filmmaker. Like, All the Real Girls is a super interesting movie. I think Joe is a really cool thriller. I'd recommend anyone go and see those like smaller movies. I just wish David Gordon Green would start moving away from the horror genre, at least in terms of like the horror franchise genre.
I think he might be. I think he's ready.
Yeah. I definitely think he is ready. Well, Kirk, here at Cinemasters Review, we do rate movies on a scale of 0 to 10. Videotapes 0 is awful, 10 is incredible. If you were to rate The Exorcist Believer on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie?
Like I said, I didn't hate it. I wasn't miserable watching it. I felt offended by a lot of the connection they tried to make. But overall, judging the movie on its own, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. So I'll put it right in the middle. I'll give it 5.
5, yeah. That's our average rating. It's a mediocre film, not a passing rating, because to me, a movie should be trying to get above the average to get that passing rating. But yeah, 5 is a passing rating. Yeah, I'm admittedly going to go a little lower than you. Yeah, like you said, if this didn't have the Exorcist name, I probably would rate it a little higher. But I can't look past that. And even if I am rating this movie by itself, I think it just fails at what it's trying to do. And I'm actually going to give it a 3.5. Oh. I think it's a fairly terrible movie. I really did not enjoy this movie. And it does the worst thing I think a movie can do, where it starts off okay, but the more it goes, I continuously was more frustrated by it. And as I walked out of the theater, I was fairly angry with what David Gordon Green had done.
That's fair.
Only if you are a die-hard horror fan that really needs to just see every horror movie. And even then, I would just say wait till this is on streaming. Just go and watch the original Exorcist. I just watched it today. It still holds up. I just rewatched it again today. Still holds up. Go check out that movie. Stay away from The Exorcist, the Believer. Or Exorcist Believer. Gosh, this movie title frustrates me. Like, I every time I typed it into my notes today, I kept on saying either Exorcist the Believer or The Exorcist the Believer. The fact there's no the there for Believer really irks me. Kirk, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
Before you leave tonight, is there anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, Silver Screen Time Machine. We are starting our Halloween series, our spooky season series. Actually, our first episode to drop today. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. We have Stuart from Golden Silent Film Podcast as our guest. And we have horror movies all the rest of the month. A lot of cool guests, a lot of cool movies we're going to be talking about. So go check that out.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to put up the banner right now because I would recommend anyone go check out Silver Screen Time Machine. They're completely focused on the opposite of what we do here at Cinemasters Review. They focus on all the good oldie movies. Just oldie movies, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But it's always great to hear you and Wendy talk about movies. Kirk, I haven't asked you this, but I can just ask you this on call. There's a certain movie by a certain Italian-American director coming out in 2 weeks. Maybe about the Osage people with Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone. Want to join me to review that movie?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. That's quite the anticipated movie here at Cinemaster. I was like, yeah, I'm getting Kirk to be a guest on that one, cool. Definitely. But yeah, thank you so much, Kirk, and I hope you have a great night.
I'll see you next time, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kirk, once again for joining me on Cinemasters Review. And yeah, like I said, everyone go and check out Silver Screen Time Machine wherever you watch your podcasts. Phenomenal podcast. Would recommend to any movie lover. But we are going to head right into our second review for the night, and that is the new indie movie She Came to Me, directed by Rebecca Miller. This is the director of Maggie's Plan, a movie that came out, I want to say 8 years ago with Greta Gerwig and Ethan Hawke. This movie stars Peter Dinklage as a composer named Steven. He is currently in a stint of writer's block, and he just needs to find a way to get those creative juices flowing again. He's married to Anne Hathaway, and she recommends that he just go and take a walk, just find a way to get lost and find a way to just get those creative juices flowing again. And on this journey, he meets Katrina, played by Marissa Tomei. She's a tugboat captain. And they sort of get a little bit entangled in a bit of an affair. and you see how this starts affecting him. We also follow his child who by the name of Julian, Stephen, and Patricia's daughter, who is adopted, and he is currently romancing a girl by the name of Teresa, who's the mother of an immigrant. She's 16 years old while he is 18, so there's a little bit of a legal issue there, and that sort of comes into the plot eventually. This movie is definitely tackling a lot, and I think it just barely works for me. I think for a lot of people, this movie will probably come up short, but I'd be lying if I said I don't enjoy these types of movies, which tackle artists and their creative drive, and sort of like what inspires them, and what can often make them feel lost in this world, and what makes them feel lonely in this world. I think the main thing that I think really makes this movie work is the performances. I think the main performances that are the best are, like I said, Peter Dinklage. I think he's one of the best actors working today. Like most people, I fell in love with him on Game of Thrones, even though I saw him in many other movies and stuff beforehand. I think he's phenomenal in The Station Agent. If anyone has not seen that great Tom McCarthy movie about just someone that inherits a train station, and I just think Peter Dinklage is so good at playing just this like tortured artist who's obviously very depressed and like dealing with a lot of things, and he definitely cares for his wife and cares for his child, but he doesn't have the best way at expressing that. And Steven is not like the most likable guy in the world. Like, you see scenes where he's at rehearsals and he's like yelling at the people, and they keep telling Steven, like, Steven, you wrote the opera, you can go home, like it's up to us to direct. And he's like, no, it needs to be perfect, because he's so rigid and everything. And the other performer I think is really, really great is Brian Darcy James. He plays the adopted father of Teresa, and when he learns that Teresa is seeing someone who is technically a legal adult, he becomes very angry, and he becomes very stringent. He is a lawyer, and he is someone that wants to always have the ability to control and have that ability of just that parental authority figure. And as someone that could have definitely come down to be like just your standard villain role, but I think Brian Darcy James, because he's such a good actor, adds a lot of life into it, and you understand why he doesn't want her daughter seeing this guy, because it is technically statutory rape with what not even technically, it is statutory rape what is going on with his daughter and her boyfriend. I do think that plot line is probably where I think the movie gets a little lost, because obviously with the movie tackling a topic like statutory rape, that is not an easy topic to tackle, and it's obviously a crime that's not fun to talk about. And I don't think the movie really has a stance about what it's trying to say about that. Not saying the movie needs to make a stance. I'm not always like, oh, a movie needs to make a clear stance about what it's trying to say, but it's just confusing to add that topic into the movie and not have it really go anywhere. And I think you just could have. I think it's just a subject that probably could have been taken out of the movie to focus more time on all these characters being lost in their way. Anne Hathaway plays Patricia, Stephen's wife, and she is very depressed. Like, she is very lost in her way of being a therapist. She's dealing with a patient who's in love with her, and she's someone who's always thought, like, maybe I want to become a nun. And I don't want to spoil where that goes, but that has a very fun conclusion. Marissa Tomei plays Katrina. She's someone that spends one night with Stephen and grows very, very attached. These are the characters I really like, and I think just tackling on the story of these two young people that are like not supposed to be dating but want to date, I think it was just kind of a puzzling decision. The ending, while it is a very nice conclusion, it left me confused as to what the movie was just kind of getting at. And looking at interviews with Rebecca Miller, I think that's kind of what she was going at. But I do think the movie probably could have benefited from having a slightly stronger conclusion. Honestly, the score of the movie I think was very nice, has a very quaint score, and it just has like a nice feeling to it. Yeah, like I said, I could definitely see a lot of people not loving this movie and honestly quite disliking it. But I like movies that are about these characters that are just lost in their way and are trying to find it. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10, I think I would give it I would give it just the passing grade of a 6. I would give it a decent score of 6 videotapes out of 10. Yeah, I am someone that really does like Peter Dinklage, and I like what he does bring to this role. Probably could have used a bit of a rewrite on the script, maybe not tackle as many ideas, even though I do appreciate movies that do tackle so many big sweeping ideas like this one. Probably could have tackled maybe 1 or 2 less, but I do think where it is strong, I do think the movie is very, very strong. Well, that does bring us to the end of our review tonight. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. Just to plug something, tomorrow, Andrew Barr and Brooklyn Vale and Cody Newberry are going to be going live on their finale for All Hearts Stone. It's been a great series to see them count down their personal list of their 500 favorite songs. And of course, we have many other great series on the video store. Yeah, like this video. It helps out a lot. Buy our shit. Next week, like I said, we don't really have any major movies except for the Eras Tour by Taylor Swift. Obviously, every other movie got out of the way the second she took October 13th as her date. If you want to go out and see it, go out and see it. I'm actually seeing it with some friends. I don't really see the need to review it because I think if people want to go see it, they're going to go see it. Like I said, because I had technical difficulties last week, I'm going to be reviewing Dumb Money and The Creator, just some movies I have a lot of things I want to say about, and movies I didn't absolutely enjoy. So yeah, that does bring us to the end of our show tonight. And yeah, as always, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.